6 men walked into Big Meech's stash house and walked out with $2 million. Within 72 hours, every single one of them was found. In 6 different states, none of them alive. The call came at 4:17 a.m. in the morning. Meech didn't need to ask who it was. Nobody called at that hour unless the world was ending or money was missing. Sometimes both. He answered on the second ring. Talk. The voice on the other end belonged to Darnell, one of his most trusted lieutenants in Detroit. Darnell never panicked. He'd been through raids, shootouts, federal surveillance. His voice stayed level through all of it. Not tonight. The spot on 7 Mile got hit. Meech sat up. The room around him was dark, except for the glow of the city outside his penthouse window. Atlanta never slept. Neither did he. How much? Silence. Just for a second. But in that second, Meech already knew. 2 million. Cash. Meech didn't raise his voice. He never did. Volume was for men who had something to prove. He had nothing to prove. How many? 6, maybe more. We're still sorting it. Cameras, they knew where they were. Every angle covered or cut. No plates, no faces. Meech stood and walked to the window. Below him, the city moved like it always did. People chasing money, chasing dreams, chasing survival. Most of them had no idea what real power looked like. They thought it was loud, flashy. It wasn't. Real power was quiet. Inside job? Had to be, Darnell said. No forced entry. Alarm was disarmed. They knew the schedule. Knew when the count was highest. Meech let that sit. He didn't respond right away. That was part of his method. Let the silence do the work. Let people feel the weight of what they just said. Finally, he spoke. Where are they now? We don't know yet, but we will. You got names? Working on it. Give me 6 hours. You got 3. Meech ended the call. He stood there for a moment, staring out at the city. $2 million didn't hurt him. BMF moved that much in a weekend. The money wasn't the problem. The disrespect was. Someone had walked into his house, taken his product, his cash, his trust, and they thought they could just disappear into the night like it never happened. They were wrong. In the world Meech built, there were rules. You could sell, you could compete, you could even talk reckless if you were stupid enough. But you never took from the family, because once you did, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about what came next. Meech picked up his phone and made the first call. It rang twice. Yeah. The voice on the other end was calm, almost bored. That was Blue Da Vinci, one of Meech's most dangerous enforcers. Blue didn't ask questions. He solved problems. Detroit got hit. 2 million. 6 men. I need names by sunrise. Done. The line went dead. Meech made the second call. This one went to Memphis. Then the third to Houston. He didn't explain. Didn't need to. The people he called already knew what it meant when Meech reached out in the middle of the night. It meant someone made a mistake. And mistakes in this world didn't get second chances. By 5 a.m., the entire BMF network was awake. From Detroit to Atlanta to Los Angeles, phones were ringing, soldiers were moving, informants were talking. The 6 men who walked into that stash house thought they were smart, thought they planned it perfectly, thought distance and silence would protect them. They didn't understand what they'd just done. They didn't just rob Big Meech. They disrespected a system, a code, a family that stretched across state lines and didn't forgive. Meech sat back down on the edge of his bed. He didn't feel anger. Anger was messy, emotional. He felt something colder. Certainty. Because in 72 hours, the streets would know what happened when you touched what belonged to BMF. And the message wouldn't be delivered in words. It would be delivered in silence. 6 men, 6 states, 6 lessons the world would never forget. There were no accidents in the BMF empire. Everything was built on purpose. Every connection, every move, every dollar that passed through the organization had a name attached to it, a face, a family. Big Meech didn't start BMF by being the loudest or the most ruthless. He built it on something harder to fake: trust. In Southwest Detroit, where Meech and his brother Terry grew up, trust was currency. You could have all the product in the world, but if nobody trusted you, you had nothing. You were alone, and alone in that world meant dead. Meech understood that early. He didn't just recruit soldiers, he built brothers. He didn't just move weight, he moved with honor. And when someone proved loyal, Meech didn't forget. He promoted them, protected them, made sure their families ate even when the streets got cold. That's why BMF grew the way it did. Detroit to Atlanta, Atlanta to Los Angeles to everywhere. It wasn't just a drug operation, it was a movement. And movements don't survive betrayal. When you joined BMF, you didn't just join a crew, you joined a code. The rules were simple, and everyone knew them. Rule 1: respect the structure. Meech was at the top, but he didn't need to remind anyone. His presence did that. When he walked into a room, conversations stopped. Not out of fear, out of respect, because everyone knew Meech took care of his people. Rule 2: protect the family. BMF wasn't just about making money. It was about protecting the people who helped you make it. If you got locked up, your family still ate. If you got hurt, your medical bills were handled. If you stayed loyal, you were untouchable. Rule 3: never steal from your own. This wasn't negotiable. You could lose a shipment. You could make a bad deal. You could even get caught slipping by the feds. Meech understood mistakes. But theft? That was different. When you stole from BMF, you weren't just taking money. You were saying the code didn't matter. You were saying loyalty was a joke. You were saying Meech's word meant nothing. And if his word meant nothing, the entire empire collapsed. That's why the response had to be absolute. Not loud, not emotional, just final. The 6 men who hit the stash house didn't understand this. Or maybe they did, and they thought they were smart enough to get away with it. Either way, they were wrong. Meech had spent 15 years building something that couldn't be touched by competitors, by snitches, by the streets. He'd survived wars with rival crews. He'd survived federal task forces. He'd survived jealousy, ambition, betrayal from people who thought they could do it better. He survived because he never let disrespect slide. Not once. People on the outside thought BMF was about cars and chains and parties. And yeah, Meech loved that life. He celebrated success. He lived loud when it was time to live loud. But beneath all of that was something colder: discipline. When the party ended and the lights went off, everyone in BMF knew what the real foundation was. Consequences. You stay loyal, you rise. You break the code, you disappear. It was that simple. And when word got out that someone had robbed a BMF stash house, when people started whispering, waiting to see what Meech would do, he already knew what the streets needed to see. Not mercy, not forgiveness, a reminder. A reminder that BMF didn't just control product, they controlled order. And order, once broken, had to be restored, no matter how far you ran, no matter how well you hid. Because in Meech's world, distance didn't mean safety. It just meant you'd die alone. By 7 a.m., Meech had 3 names. By noon, he had all 6. He didn't need the police, didn't need forensics or warrants or investigations. He had something more efficient: the streets. In every city BMF touched, there were eyes. People who owed favors, people who stayed quiet because staying quiet kept them breathing, people who understood that when Big Meech asked a question, the right answer kept you alive, the wrong answer didn't. Darnell called back at 7:14. We got movement. Meech was in his car by then, heading toward a meeting that no longer mattered. He put the phone on speaker. Talk. One of the 6 got sloppy. Used his debit card at a gas station outside Houston. We pulled the footage, ran his face. Name's Kevin Trask. Small time. Worked security at a warehouse 2 blocks from the spot. There it was. Inside job. Just like Meech knew. Who else? Still pulling threads, but we got 2 more names from Street Talk. Brothers. Damon and Eric Walls. They've been quiet for years, but word is they were asking questions about BMF shipments 3 months ago. Nobody thought much of it then. They thought wrong, Meech said. Where are they? Damon's in Memphis. Cousin's place. Eric's somewhere in Nevada, probably Vegas. We're narrowing it. Meech didn't respond right away. He let the information settle. 6 men, spread across the country. They thought they were smart, thought if they split up, scattered like roaches, the trail would go cold. They didn't understand how BMF worked. Geography didn't protect you. State lines didn't protect you. The only thing that protected you was loyalty. And they'd burned that the moment they walked through that door. Keep going, Meech said. I want all 6 by tonight. You'll have them. The line went dead. Meech made his next call. This one went to a man named Omari in Miami. Omari didn't move weight. He moved information. He had connections in police departments, parole offices, halfway houses. If someone was breathing in Florida, Omari could find them. I need a location, Meech said. Name's Kevin Trask. Last seen in Houston, but he's got family in Miami. How fast? Now. Done. 3 calls, 3 cities. The net was tightening. By 9 a.m., the names started flooding in. Kevin Trask, Houston. Damon Walls, Memphis. Eric Walls, Las Vegas. Clifton Hayes, Phoenix. Low-level dealer who'd worked a few BMF corners years ago before getting cut for skimming. Marcus Rook Jefferson, Cleveland. Muscle. Ex-boxer. Thought his hands made him untouchable. And the last one, Julian Moss. The mastermind, the one who put it all together. He was the smartest of the 6, and he knew it. He didn't run to family, didn't stay with friends. He disappeared into a small town outside Raleigh, North Carolina, rented a cabin under a fake name, paid cash. He thought he was invisible. He wasn't, because Julian made one mistake. He called his girl, just once. A 2-minute conversation to tell her he was okay, that he'd be back soon, that everything was going to be fine. That call pinged a tower, and BMF had people who knew how to read towers. By 2 p.m., Meech had all 6 names, all 6 locations, all 6 faces printed and distributed across his network. He didn't send an army. He didn't need to. He sent C-message. 1 to Houston, 1 to Memphis, 1 to Vegas, 1 to Phoenix, 1 to Cleveland, 1 to Raleigh. Each message was the same: a name, a face, an address, and one instruction: handle it, clean, quiet, no witnesses. The enforcers didn't ask why. They didn't ask for proof. They knew what a message like this meant. Someone had crossed the line, and Meech wanted the line redrawn in blood. In Houston, Kevin Trask was staying at a Motel 6 off the interstate. He thought he was being careful, paid cash, kept the blinds closed, didn't leave except to grab food. He didn't notice the black Tahoe in the parking lot. He didn't notice the 2 men watching his door. He didn't notice anything until it was too late. In Memphis, Damon Walls was at his cousin's house playing video games. He felt safe there. His cousin didn't ask questions, didn't judge, just let him crash on the couch and told him everything would blow over. It wouldn't. At 11 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Damon's cousin opened it. The men who walked in didn't say a word. In Vegas, Eric Walls was at a casino trying to blend in. He figured the crowd would hide him. Hundreds of people, cameras everywhere, security. He didn't realize BMF had people in that casino. Dealers, waitresses, pit bosses. When Eric walked out to his car at 1 a.m., 2 men were waiting by the driver's side door. He never made it inside. In Phoenix, Clifton Hayes was staying with a girl he used to run with. She didn't know what he'd done, didn't know who he'd stolen from. She just knew that at 3 a.m., her front door got kicked in. And when the sun came up, Clifton was gone. In Cleveland, Marcus Rook Jefferson thought his reputation would save him. thought people knew better than to touch him. He was wrong. Nobody's reputation was bigger than BMF's. They found him at a gym, walked right up to him in broad daylight. No one saw anything. No one ever did. And in Raleigh, Julian Moss, the mastermind, the planner, the one who thought he was too smart to get caught, was sitting in his cabin watching the news when he heard footsteps on the porch. He stood, walked to the window, saw nothing. Then he heard the door open behind him. He turned, and in that moment, Julian finally understood what everyone in the streets already knew. You can't outrun Big Meech. You can only delay the inevitable. They didn't make the news. 6 men, 6 states, 72 hours, and not a single headline. That's how you knew it was BMF. No shootouts, no car chases, no witnesses running to the police with stories about masked men and gunfire. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes people stop talking, stop asking questions, stop wondering what happened. Because deep down, they already knew. Houston, Texas. Kevin Trask. Kevin died in his sleep. At least, that's what it looked like. The motel manager found him 2 days later when housekeeping complained about the smell. Door was locked from the inside. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just Kevin, lying in bed, eyes open, staring at nothing. The medical examiner would later write, "Cardiac arrest" on the report. Natural causes. It happens. But the people who knew the ones who moved in BMF circles, they knew better. They knew Kevin didn't have a heart condition. They knew his last meal was delivered by someone he thought he could trust. They knew that in this world, poison was cleaner than bullets. And they knew that when BMF wanted you gone, you didn't get a chance to run. You just stopped waking up. Kevin's body was found with his phone next to him. The last call he made was to his mother. He told her he loved her, told her he'd be home soon. He lied. Memphis, Tennessee. Damon Walls. Damon's cousin opened the door at 11:07 p.m. 2 men stood on the porch, both calm, both dressed like they were stopping by to talk business. Damon here. The cousin hesitated. He wasn't stupid. He knew who these men worked for. He knew what it meant when they showed up unannounced. But Damon was family. Nah, man. He left yesterday. Don't know where. One of the men smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile that said, "We already know you're lying." "That's cool," the man said. "We'll wait." They walked inside. The cousin didn't try to stop them. Damon was upstairs. He heard the voices, heard his cousin's tone shift from casual to terrified. He knew what that meant. He thought about running, thought about the window, the fire escape, the alley behind the house, but his legs wouldn't move because he knew the truth. They didn't come here to chase him. They came here to finish it. When the 2 men walked into the bedroom, Damon was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands on his knees, head down. He didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't ask for mercy. He just looked up and said one thing. "Meech sent you?" The taller man nodded. Damon closed his eyes. "Yeah, I figured." That was the last thing he ever said. When the police found Damon 3 days later, his cousin had already skipped town. The house was empty. No prints, no weapons, no witnesses. Just another unsolved homicide in a city full of them. Las Vegas, Nevada. Eric Walls. Eric thought the crowd would save him. He spent 2 days inside casinos, surrounded by tourists and security cameras and noise. He gambled, drank, pretended everything was normal, but every time he looked over his shoulder, he felt it, the weight of being watched. He told himself he was paranoid, told himself there was no way BMF could reach him here. Not in Vegas, not with this many people around. He was wrong. At 1:14 a.m., Eric cashed out his chips and walked toward the parking garage. He was drunk enough to feel brave, sober enough to know he should have stayed inside. The garage was quiet, too quiet. His car was on the 3rd level. He hit the key fob. The lights blinked. He opened the door, and that's when he saw the reflection in the window. 2 men, standing behind him, Eric spun around, mouth open, ready to shout, but no sound came out, because one of the men was already moving. Fast, efficient, silent. When hotel security reviewed the footage the next morning, they saw Eric get into his car. Saw him sit there for 30 seconds, then saw him slump forward against the steering wheel. They didn't see anyone else. The camera angle was just slightly off, just enough. Phoenix, Arizona. Clifton Hayes. Clifton's girl woke up to the sound of her front door splintering. She screamed. Clifton bolted out of bed, reaching for the pistol he kept under the mattress. He didn't make it. 3 men came through the door like water. Smooth. Practiced. They'd done this before. Clifton raised the gun. One of the men looked at him. Didn't flinch. Didn't rush. Just looked. And in that look, Clifton saw his future. He lowered the gun. Please. The man shook his head. You knew the rules. That was it. 4 words. No anger. No emotion. Just fact. Clifton closed his eyes. When the girl finally stopped screaming and looked up from the corner where she'd been hiding, the men were gone. So was Clifton. The only thing left behind was his phone. Sitting on the nightstand, screen cracked. The last text he'd sent was to his brother. I'm sorry. Cleveland, Ohio. Marcus Rook Jefferson. Rook thought his hands would save him. He'd been a boxer. A good one. Not great, but good enough to earn respect. Good enough that most people didn't test him. But BMF wasn't most people. They found him at the gym. Mid-afternoon. Broad daylight. He was on the heavy bag, headphones in, sweat dripping, completely in the zone. He didn't hear them walk in. Didn't see them until one of them stepped into his line of sight. Rook stopped punching, pulled out his earbuds. Can I help you? The man smiled. Yeah, we need to talk. Rook looked around. The gym was empty. The owner was in the back office. The few people who'd been there earlier had suddenly found reasons to leave. Rook wasn't stupid. He knew what this was. Outside? The man shook his head. Right here's fine. Rook's jaw tightened. He thought about swinging. Thought about using those hands one last time. Thought about going down fighting. But then he saw the second man, standing by the door, arms crossed, watching. And Rook realized something. Fighting wouldn't change the outcome. It would just make it hurt more. So he didn't fight. He just nodded. All right. They walked him into the locker room. No one heard anything. No one saw anything. And when the owner came out of his office 20 minutes later, Rook was gone. His gym bag was still there. His phone. His keys. But Rook? Gone. Raleigh, North Carolina. Julian Moss. Julian was the smartest of the 6. He planned the heist, knew the schedules, disabled the alarms, picked the crew. He thought he'd covered everything, but he forgot one thing. Love makes you sloppy. That 2-minute phone call to his girl. That's all it took. 2 minutes. And BMF had him. Julian was sitting in his cabin, watching the news, when he heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy, deliberate, not trying to hide. He stood, walked to the window, saw nothing but trees and darkness. Then he heard the door creak open behind him. He spun around. 3 men stood in the doorway. Julian's mouth went dry. How? One of the men held up a phone. Julian's girl's phone. You called. Julian's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the couch. He didn't ask how they found her. Didn't ask if she was okay. He already knew the answers. Meech, know it was my idea? The man nodded. He knows. Julian laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because there was nothing else left to do. Tell him. Tell him I respect the game. The man didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because respect didn't change what happened next. 6 men, 6 states, 72 hours. And when it was over, the streets didn't need an explanation. They just needed to see the result. Empty homes, unanswered phones, families, asking questions no one would answer. The message was clear. You can rob Big Meech, but you can't survive it. The $2 million was recovered within a week. Every dollar. It was found in storage units, stuffed in duffel bags under beds, hidden in car trunks, buried in backyard sheds. The 6 men had split it up, thinking that would make it harder to trace. It didn't, because BMF didn't just find the men. They found everything the men touched, every place they stayed, every person they trusted, every hiding spot they thought was safe. And when the money came back, it came back whole. Meech was in Atlanta when Darnell brought him the final count. They were in a warehouse on the south side, the kind of place that looked abandoned from the outside, but ran like a Fortune 500 company on the inside. Darnell dropped 6 duffel bags on the table. That's all of it. 2 million. Counted twice. Meech looked at the bags, didn't touch them, didn't unzip them to check. He didn't need to. If Darnell said it was all there, it was all there. Good work. Darnell nodded, waiting for the next move. Waiting to see where the money would go. Back into circulation, probably. Back into the machine. But Meech didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the bags like they were something dirty, something diseased. "You know what this money cost?" Meech said. Darnell didn't answer. It wasn't really a question. It cost 6 lives. It cost trust. It cost time. It cost the one thing we can't get back, peace of mind. Meech walked around the table slowly, hands in his pockets, voice calm. Those 6 men didn't just steal cash. They stole something bigger. They made people wonder. Made people ask if BMF was still untouchable. Made people think maybe they could get away with it too. He stopped walking, looked at Darnell. That doubt? That's what we just paid to erase. Darnell understood. He'd been with Meech long enough to know that none of this was ever really about money. It was about the code. "So what do you want me to do with it?" Darnell asked. Meech didn't hesitate. "Divide it up. Equal shares. Give it to the families." Darnell blinked. "The families?" "Yeah, the people who stayed loyal. The ones who didn't run. The ones who kept their mouths shut when the feds came knocking. The ones who did their time and never said a word." Meech zipped up one of the bags and pushed it toward Darnell. "Find 20 families. People who've been down since the beginning. People who lost someone. People who sacrificed. Give each of them 100,000. Darnell stared at him. "You're giving away the whole 2 million? "I'm not giving it away. I'm investing it." Meech leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Those families? They're gonna remember this. They're gonna remember that when BMF got hit, we didn't just punish the people who wronged us. We rewarded the people who stayed true." He looked Darnell dead in the eye. "Loyalty isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. And you earn it by showing people that standing with you means something, that it's worth it, that we take care of our own." Darnell nodded slowly. He got it now. This wasn't charity. This was strategy. Because 20 families would talk. They'd tell their friends, their neighbors, their cousins. They'd tell the streets that Big Meech didn't just come for his enemies. He came through for his family. And in a world where most people only remembered the violence, that kind of generosity was more powerful than fear. It built something deeper. It built legend. Over the next 2 weeks, the money moved quietly. A single mother in Detroit who'd lost her son to the game. She came home one day to find an envelope on her kitchen table. No note, just cash. A grandmother in Atlanta raising 3 kids because their father was doing 20 years. She opened her mailbox and found a package. Unmarked. Untraceable. An ex-soldier who'd taken a charge to protect the crew, kept his mouth shut through 2 years in county, came out to nothing. He got a call from a number he didn't recognize. A voice he didn't know told him to check his bank account. When he did, he sat down on the curb and cried. None of them knew where it came from, but they knew. Everyone knew. This was Meech. This was BMF. This was what loyalty looked like when it ran both ways. Word spread fast, not through the news, not through social media, through something older, something more powerful. Conversation. People in barber shops, people in corner stores, people sitting on porches late at night, talking about how so-and-so just got 100,000 out of nowhere. And every story ended the same way. Meech took care of them. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But it changed the air, because now, when people thought about crossing BMF, they didn't just think about what would happen if they got caught. They thought about what they'd be walking away from. A family that didn't forget. A brotherhood that protected its own. A leader who understood that power wasn't just about taking. It was about giving back. Meech never talked about the money again, never brought it up in meetings, never mentioned it in speeches, never used it to make a point. He didn't need to. The streets did that for him. And 6 months later, when a crew out of Chicago thought about running the same play, hitting a BMF stash house, taking the cash, disappearing, they didn't, not because they were scared, but because they'd heard the stories. They knew what happened to the 6 men who tried, and they knew what happened to the families who stayed loyal. They did the math, and they walked away, because, in the end, the 2 million never mattered. What mattered was the message it sent. Steal from us, and you'll vanish. Stand with us, and you'll never be forgotten. That was the code. That was BMF. And that was why, years later, when people talked about Big Meech, they didn't just talk about the cars, or the clubs, or the empire. They talked about the time he gave away $2 million. Not because he had to, but because he could. Because that's what real power looked like. Not hoarding, not flexing, but knowing that the more you gave to the people who mattered, the more untouchable you became. And Meech? He was untouchable. After that week, something changed in the streets. It wasn't loud, wasn't sudden, but everyone felt it. BMF stash houses became untouchable. Not because of gates or guards or guns, but because of what those 6 men represented. A lesson written in silence. A warning that didn't need to be spoken. You could sell against BMF if you were brave enough. You could talk reckless if you were stupid enough. You could even compete in the same cities, on the same blocks, if you had the product and the backbone. But you didn't steal from them. You didn't touch their houses. You didn't cross that line. Because everyone knew what happened when you did. 6 men, 6 states, 72 hours. It became a ghost story. The kind of story people told in hushed voices when they wanted to remind someone what real power looked like. Somebody would get drunk and start talking big, start saying they could run a play on BMF, start saying Meech wasn't untouchable. And someone older, someone who knew better, would just shake their head. You remember them 6 dudes? That's all it took. The room would go quiet. Because yeah, everybody remembered. In Detroit, where it all started, the stash house on 7 Mile became a legend. Nobody went near it, not to rob it, not to watch it, not even to walk past it if they didn't have to. It sat there like a monument, clean, quiet, protected by something more powerful than bullets. Reputation. The kind of reputation that made people cross the street, made them take the long way home, made them tell their younger brothers and cousins and friends, don't even think about it. Because BMF didn't just control product anymore. They controlled belief. People believed that if you touched what was theirs, you'd disappear. Not in a week, not in a month, right away. Fast, clean, final. And belief was stronger than fear. Fear faded. Fear could be fought. Fear made people do desperate things. But belief made people fall in line. Meech never had to talk about the 6 men again. He didn't need to reference it in conversations. Didn't need to use it as a threat. Didn't need to remind people what he was capable of. The streets did that for him. Every time someone thought about stepping out of line, someone else would pull them aside. Don't be stupid. You know what happened last time. And that was enough. The story lived on its own now, growing, spreading, becoming myth. Some people said the 6 men were tortured first. That Meech made examples of them. That their bodies were left in pieces as a warning. That wasn't true, but Meech never corrected it. Because the myth was more useful than the truth. The truth was cold, professional, efficient. The myth was terrifying, and terror kept the peace. In Atlanta, where Meech built his empire into something bigger than the streets, the story took on a different meaning. It wasn't just about crime anymore. It was about respect, about how a man could move through the world with power and never raise his voice, about how you could run an empire without becoming a monster. Because Meech didn't just kill the 6 men, he gave $2 million to the families who stayed loyal. And that balance, that mix of consequence and care, made him something rare. A king people actually wanted to follow. In the clubs, when Meech walked in, people didn't scatter. They gravitated toward him. They wanted to be near him, wanted to shake his hand, wanted to be seen with him, not because they were scared, but because they respected what he built, a system that punished betrayal and rewarded loyalty in equal measure. That's what separated BMF from every other crew. Most organizations ruled by fear alone. And fear kept people in line for a while. But eventually, fear bred resentment. Resentment bred betrayal. And betrayal tore everything apart. Meech understood that. So, he built something different, a family that people wanted to protect, not because they had to, but because they believed in it. Years later, when the feds finally came for BMF, when the wiretaps and the surveillance and the informants piled up, they couldn't believe what they found. An organization that operated in dozens of cities, moved millions of dollars, employed hundreds of people, and almost nobody snitched. They flipped a few. Got a couple names, built a case, but the loyalty ran so deep that even when facing life sentences, people stayed quiet. They didn't do it out of fear. They did it because of the code, because they remembered the grandmother who got $100,000 when her son went to prison, because they remembered the single mother whose rent got paid when she lost her job, because they remembered that when BMF said family, they meant it. And family doesn't turn on family. Even when the walls are closing in, Big Meech eventually went down, not because someone robbed him, not because someone outsmarted him, but because the federal government threw everything they had at him. And even empires can't fight the government forever. But here's the thing. Meech went to prison. The organization collapsed. The money dried up. The clubs closed. The cars got repoed. And still people talk about him like he never left. Because what Meech built wasn't just a drug empire. It was a philosophy, a way of moving through the world that said you could have power without losing your soul, that you could be feared and loved at the same time, that you could come from nothing and build something so strong that even after it falls, people remember it like scripture. And the 6 men? They're part of that scripture now. A cautionary tale, a reminder, a story that parents tell their kids when they start thinking the streets are a game. You think you're untouchable? Let me tell you about 6 men who thought the same thing. Nobody knows where the bodies are. Some say they were dumped in rivers. Some say they were buried in the desert. Some say they were cremated and scattered so completely that nothing was left. It doesn't matter, because the absence is the point. The fact that they disappeared so thoroughly, so completely that not even rumors could find them, that's the legacy. 6 men walked into a stash house and took $2 million, and 72 hours later, they ceased to exist. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. No trials, no arrests, no witness statements, just silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any threat ever could. And so the story endures. In Detroit, in Atlanta, in every city BMF ever touched. When someone gets too bold, too reckless, too confident, someone else leans over and whispers, "You remember them 6 dudes?" And just like that, the room changes, the bravado fades, the big talk stops, because everyone remembers, everyone knows. You can rise in this world. You can build. You can win. But if you cross the line, if you disrespect the code, you don't just lose. You disappear. And the world keeps spinning like you were never there at all. That's the legacy of Big Meech. Not the money, not the cars, not the parties, but the understanding that power, real power, isn't about what you say. It's about what you don't have to say. Because when your name alone is enough to stop a crime before it happens, when your story is enough to make grown men think twice, when people 20 years later still tell your tale like it happened yesterday, that's immortality. That's legend. That's BMF.